or some setting that you want to change. And the path variable, what it does is it tells the operating system where it should look for programs that you want to run. Okay, so there's this path variable, and what you should do is you should just type this sort of, don't worry too much about what it means right now, but you say path equals $path $user/sbin:/sbin. So forget about this last part. You don't have to worry about that right now. Just type this beginning part, and what that's saying is to add the user sbin directory and the /sbin directory to your path. Your path already contains the /bin directory, and it already contains /user/bin, and that's the stuff for normal user usage. Okay, but as a system administrator, you're going to want to use commands in these directories, and so you should add that to your path of your personal account, and you should also add it to the path of the root user's account. Okay, so go become the root user, go into the root users.bash profile in their home directory, and alter the path the exact same way. Okay, so this line right here sets the path to be a new value. It tells the operating system that you might want to run commands in here, so it should look in there when you type a command name. And then export path, makes that setting active in some sense. Okay, so this is what you should do here. And then once you make those changes, remember, you hit escape to go into the command mode, shift : and then say WQ to write your changes and quit out of the VI editor. Okay, you do that, and now your bash profile will be changed. All right, and now you'll have a new profile. Typically, you have to log out and log back in to do it. Another way that you can do it is just say source.bash profile. Okay, and that will make your changes active like right now. Okay, so by saying source and the name of the configuration file, that will run the configuration file. It's like you just logged in again and it ran the configuration file. This stuff runs every time you start up a new shell, like bash profile and bash rc. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to show you about editing configuration files, is just setting your path so that you don't run into problems later when we start doing system administration stuff. And now what I want to show you is how to set an alias. Now I want to alter a separate user configuration file to set an alias, and I'll show you what an alias is in a second. Okay, so let's mess with the bash rc file this time. And if we go in there again with the VI editor, you'll see it says in here user-specific aliases and functions. That's where specific aliases go. And we know what an alias is in real life, right? It's like like an alternate identity or an assumed name or something like that. And that's what it is in the shell too. It's a little bit different, but you'll see in a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add some stuff here. So I'll hit I to go into insert mode. Okay, and then I'll go down here to the end, and what I'll do is I'll type alias, I'll put a space, and then I'll say rm equals single quotes rm minus I, with the space between rm and minus I, okay, and then another single quote. Okay, so in some sense what I'm doing here is saying rm minus I is the assumed identity of rm. Every time I type rm at the command line, the operating system's really going to do rm minus I. And remember, when I introduced rm to you, the minus I command just made it double check to make sure that you wanted to delete that file that you specified. Okay, so this is going to do it all the time. You never have to put the minus I option on, because every time you type rm now, it's really going to do rm minus I. Okay, so let's save this. We'll hit escape. So you go back to command mode, shift : okay, and then WQ to write our changes and quit. And we'll do that. And now what we do is we'll do that source.bash rc again. Okay, so this runs the bash rc program. And now let's do an ls here. Let me remove temp2.txt with the rm command. Now notice I'm not using rm minus I. I'm just saying rm. So it seems like it should just remove the file, right? But it's going to ask me, it's going to double check with me because I've got that alias now. So even though I just typed rm, it's really doing an rm minus I. It's inquiring and making sure that that's what I want to delete. If I really do want to delete it, I can say y. If I don't, I can say n. And that way I get that double check without having to remember to type the minus I option. I just want to do a couple more things here before we wrap up this introduction. Talk a little bit more about directory names. Okay, so here we are in the Perry directory, and I do an ls, and you can see I've got these subdirectories. Okay, so we've already seen that to use to go into one of those subdirectories, I can just type cd hold, for instance, and now that takes me into the hold directory. Okay, but the only reason this worked, this cd hold command, the only reason that worked is because I was already in the Perry directory. If I was up in like the /bin directory and I said cd hold, that wouldn't work because there's no subdirectory of that directory called hold. Okay, so this is what we call a relative directory name. And you can spot a relative directory name because it doesn't start with a slash. Okay, and the contrast to relative directory names are absolute directory names, and absolute directory names do start with a slash. Okay, so absolute directory names will work from anywhere in the system. A relative directory name depends on where you're at. So see, I'm in the Perry directory, so cd hold works perfectly well. Okay, now let's change from the hold directory over to the scripts directory. All right, and I can do that by saying cd ... I could hit enter, and then I would be back in the Perry directory, and then I could say cd scripts as a separate command, or I could do it all in one command by saying cd ... /scripts. Okay, now the slash on the end is superfluous. That's not necessary, but when I did the tab completion, it just showed up. Okay, but if that's not there, it would work just as well. It doesn't matter. Okay, but the point here is this does not start with a slash again, right? So this is a relative directory name. So it's saying go up one level, that's what the ... says, and then go down into the scripts directory. Again, this will only work from some directory that's like, you know, the C directory, or the mail directory, or the hold directory, because it goes up one level to get to the Perry directory and then down into the scripts directory. So I do that, and now I get down into the scripts directory. Okay, so there's another example of a relative directory name. Let me give you an example of an absolute directory name. Say I want to go back to the hold directory again. So what I can do here to give an absolute directory name is you start with a slash and you just specify it right from the top. You say home/Perry/hold. Okay? And like I said, this is going to work from anywhere in the whole directory structure. It doesn't matter because you're specifying the name, you know, you're specifying the entire name, /home/Perry/hold. That's the full name of that directory. And when I go in there, that's it. And if you do a PWD on that, you can see there's the full directory name, and that's what I specified there. That's the absolute directory name. And like I said, that works from anywhere on the system. So I'm just trying to give you more of a sense here on how to move around in the system. And you know, typically we use relative directory names because we're moving from one directory to another, we're moving from one directory up to another, or whatever. But sometimes absolute directory names come in handy when you just want to move, you know, from somewhere in the system to somewhere completely different that has nothing to do with relatively to where you are now. Okay? And that's how you would do it. You start with a slash and you specify the whole directory name out completely. All right, well, it's time to wrap up our second Introduction to Linux nugget here. In this one, we talked about the man pages and the info pages, and I was really trying to impress upon you what a good resource this is for, you know, learning about the details of Linux, how commands work, what options are available for each command, that kind of stuff. Then we talked about the directory structure of Linux and how to specify directory names. And understanding this stuff is going to make your life a lot easier navigating around the system. And then we talked a little bit about user config files, and I had you make a couple changes to your user config files. And you know, I hope you didn't feel like I left you hanging here, because we're definitely going to talk about that stuff in more detail later once we have a, you know, more firm grounding in Linux. I was just trying to, you know, subvert some frustration that you might run into when we get to the administration tasks and that kind of stuff. Well, I hope you found this nugget informative, and thanks again for viewing.